So now we're in part 3 of Extra History's Khosrau series, titled The Immortal Soul. And so yeah, it seems like the tensions between Rome and the Sasanian Empire are now revving up. So I'm really looking forward, because like I said, we're no strangers towards Justinian and Khosrau. They've been mentioned before, so... And we covered videos regarding them, so it is interesting to see through the Sasanian perspective, I must say. And yeah.
Khosrau defeated Mazdak and put down his brother's rebellion. The priests gave him a new name, Anushirawan, the Immortal Soul. It was an honor that he intended to earn.
That is a pretty cool title, though. Like, legit, though. Anushirawan.
Upon coming into his own, Khosrau burst into a flurry of action nearly unparalleled in history. He reformed almost every aspect of the empire, trying to fix those broken systems that had nearly doomed his father's reign, and guiding Iran into a new golden age. Both his and his father's successions had nearly been derailed by pressures on their army. It turns out that structuring your military as a single unified force means that it can only serve on one side of the empire at a time, and a single defeat, or even an overcommitment to a single border, could easily leave you scrambling for emergency funds to hire another army at the last minute. Khosrau planned to expand and restructure his military, but to do that, he was gonna need money. His father, who had recognized this same issue, had long ago begun a property survey of the entire empire, cataloging what each citizen owned and what they could afford to pay. But a survey that long takes forever, so it wasn't complete until Khosrau's time. Khosrau made use of this immediately. He levied new taxes that demanded a fixed amount based on wealth, asking the richest citizens to pay the most. He also required that taxes be paid with coin and not goods. He didn't need his farmers' perishable wheat, he needed gold. In the end, people ended up paying higher taxes than they used to, but their tax rate was now consistent, year after year. No more panicked emergency levies. And now, Khosrau could stockpile that non-perishable money for a rainy day. Next on the reform list was tax collection. For generations, the noble families had been responsible for both assessing and collecting taxes. But now that Kavad's land survey had made their assessments irrelevant, Khosrau delivered the killing blow, by taking away their ability to collect taxes too. In their place, he created a new upper middle class called the Dagans, and appointed them as tax collectors who answered only to Khosrau and the priests. The nobles could no longer lie about how much wealth their provinces generated, or skim off the top to line their own pockets at the expense of the imperial treasury. Of course, the Dagans eventually became corrupt in their own right, but Khosrau had succeeded where it mattered most to him. He took power away from the noble families and doubled revenues for his empire. Now flush with cash, Khosrau could finally afford his military overhaul.
I'm the voice inside your head.
So yeah, we do love reformers on this channel. I remember when we were covering the Dovahadi series, I really like Emperor Diocletian because of his reforms, and, you know, overall, some of the greatest rulers I can think of in history were all really great reformers, you know, changing the system, trying to be more efficient, and I think it was interesting, you know, they had one single army kind of thing. And it seemed like an army that was, for the most part, at least the way he explained it right there, it seemed like it wasn't an army dispersed or divided, it was a single thing. So, yeah, they can only be at a certain place at a certain time. And, yeah, it just seems like a lack of mobility, a lack of, what's the word I'm looking for right now? They're not dispersed enough. It seems like, yeah, and also kind of like a glass cannon. It's like, well, I don't think I use that word correctly, but point is, like, yeah, if it gets beaten, you're screwed, you know? So I'm wondering if he's just gonna create multiple armies, or like create a big army but manage to divide it, kind of like a core system-ish, like, and disperse it around. Yeah, it's gonna be interesting, because I'm very interested in seeing the military reform, which he's about to get to. Right now, he's just getting to the money part. And yeah, tax the rich. We love that. Tax the rich, yeah. um, but yeah, essentially crippling the nobility is something that his dad, have been trying to do, and yeah, I think that's just smart and just aiming for the money. Because again, he's not focused on the weed; he's focused on the money. Because with the money, you can afford the military changes and like other changes that need to happen. So he's overall revamping the economic and social status quo and changing it, but for the better. So I am impressed by Khosrau, and obviously with how much of a thorn he becomes on the Roman side, and being a pretty famous enemy of Rome, you can definitely see why the man was intelligent and seems an effective ruler. So, yeah.
He split it into 4 divisions, one for each corner of the empire. Each division would be led by its own general, and here Khosrau threw the noble families a bone by assigning them command. This was a sly power play too, though, because he made sure that the nobles were never given command of an army in their home region, so they could never consolidate power against him.
That's just smart. And yeah, that's what I was just saying right now. Like, I was wondering, alright, like, make a army and then just divide it and disperse it, not all united in one single area at a given time, because that's just not effective, especially when you're an empire like this. Like, he's surrounded on different sides. You have the Hephalites on one side, you have the Romans on the other, and then you have up in the north, raids from other groups. So, it's like, if you had like one section maybe covered by like, well, I just mean like geographically speaking, like an empire in the middle here ain't gonna do well, with just one stationary army. So I'm glad he realized that. Like I said, I did not know that the Sasanians operated that way. So good thing Khosrau fixed that and dispersing, And I was worried for a second there when he mentioned, he gave some of the nobles leadership. I'm like, that seems like a recipe for them to rebel. They have the command of an army. But yeah, here, making sure they rule in areas that they're not from, so not consolidating gains, is pretty good. Also, I guess if you have some rival noble families in command against one another, that could also, he didn't mention that, but like that would be, I imagine, some incentive for them not all banding together to jump you or to turn on you. So overall, like, yeah, this is just what I really like, just seeing this guy at work and fixing all the issues
against him. And where nobles had once been the only class allowed to serve as elite cavalry, Iran's most prestigious unit, Khosrau now allowed the Dagans into that exclusive club. Khosrau had learned well from his father's reign. Kavad had tried to go after the nobles directly by embracing Mazdak, a mistake that nearly cost him the empire. Khosrau, on the other hand, had won the nobles' favor by opposing Mazdak before quietly rooting out their other sources of power and replacing them with the Dagans, a loyal new social class of his own creation. The nobles still had influence, but not enough to threaten Khosrau the way Sukhra once threatened Kavad. And with these reforms, the empire flourished. Khosrau built walls at the 4 key entrances to his empire, making it easier to defend against invaders on all sides. He built a better network of roads so his armies could travel more quickly, and that network enticed even more merchants from China and India along the prosperous Silk Road. This influx of trade brought not only wealth, but knowledge. Khosrau imported works on mathematics, astronomy, and philosophy from India on one side and Rome on the other, hoping to create a court of learning. Iran already had a long history of embracing education. 300 years before Khosrau, the founders of his own Sasanian dynasty had built a university complete with state-funded scholarships and the promise of safety and freedom to all who studied there. That promise lured refugee scholars from the Eastern Roman Empire, where Justinian had recently banned pagan teachings, leaving the classical Greek scholars from the famous School of Athens with nowhere to go. Khosrau welcomed them to his own university with open arms, and they declared him worthy of the title Plato's Philosopher King. The title was nice, but sticking it to Justinian, even nicer. Khosrau took a genuine...
Yeah, that's interesting. I said he's got it all covered in all aspects, I think. You know, militarily, economically, socially, and, you know, in terms... It's always good to see... we do love reformers on this channel. I do always admire a reformer and people who just show up and start fixing everything, because they're always the best. You know, and... yeah, just like knowledge is power, so attracting as many people as you can, that's great. Building formidable defenses on all, you know, solidifying your border defense, also great. And, yeah, just essentially getting wealth through the roads and the networks, because that's kind of like an aspect about like the Roman Empire, like their roads, right? Every road leads to Rome. So like roads... often something like, yeah, constructing them, linking them, like, it doesn't seem so glamorous when you think about the accomplishment of, like, kings or empires, but very important, very underrated thing, because, you know, like, again, with the Rome example, all roads lead to Rome, and, yeah, like, it creates a more... it creates more interconnectivity, I feel, you know? Which is always good for large territory, and obviously attracting people and letting people pass by. Again, like, Khosrau definitely is seemingly restoring the Sasanians to a golden age with his genius and his effective governing and ruling.
Personal interest in education. He attended a medical conference at the university with physicians from around the world, and after listening to them, he decided to add a hospital to his university. The library he built for it consisted of 259 rooms filled with row upon row of medical texts translated into every language. But even that incredible library was not enough for Khosrau. He wanted to gather all of the knowledge about Iran into one place. He urged his advisors to collect and write down their history going back to ancient times. Alas, this great collection would be lost several centuries later, but before it disappeared, it provided the basis for Iran's great national epic, the Shahnameh. And the Shahnameh's author came from Khosrau's own Dagan class, as the Dagans would become the empire's leading class of scholars. But Khosrau wasn't done yet. His next great challenge would be an attempt to restore the sacred text of Iran's Zoroastrian religion. Even today, Zoroastrianism is one of the world's oldest active religions, with roots dating back at least as far as the 5th century BCE, and probably a lot farther. The belief system taught by the prophet Zoroaster had originally been passed down through the oral tradition. At one point, those teachings were written down in a great collection known as the Avesta, but when Alexander the Great conquered Iran in 330 BCE, he had burned down the old Shah's palace, and the Avesta with it. The oral tradition was all that remained. But in the centuries since that fire, many of Iran's great Shahs had attempted to collect and re-record the Avesta from those oral accounts. Khosrau's predecessors had laid much of the groundwork, but he was determined to finish the job. He assigned his priests to review and rationalize their collection, organizing the scattered fragments into a master copy that set the standard for Orthodox faith. Khosrau became a mirror for cultured behavior that upper-class Iranians were expected to follow. Schools for the education of young noblemen began teaching the sciences as well as the courtly arts like poetry and music. And best of all, Khosrau insisted that anybody who wanted respect in Iran become really, really good at board games. After visiting India in search of medical knowledge, one of Khosrau's university physicians had brought back the games chess and backgammon. Chess had been devised as a military strategy game, teaching players
and the guy's playing chess, literally. But, yeah, I think it's the cultural aspect that I'm finding very interesting at the moment. Like, the man's very cultured, you know what I mean? And a great emphasis on just knowledge and wisdom, and that's another aspect of, like, a really successful empire like Rome, because I'm just always gonna bring up Rome, because why not? And also, it is pretty relevant because obviously Rome's involved in this series. But yeah, it's like I think of like when Augustus you know, had a big cultural thing when he became, you know, emperor and was ruling the Roman Empire. How he put a big emphasis on culture. Like when, like for my class this semester, we're taking a mythology class, and no, it's the epic class. They're very similar, but we're taking an epic class, and we had to read the Aeneid, you know, by Virgil, and you know, that a lot of that was commissioned by Augustus, and obviously there's a lot of politicalness in there, but as you can kind of tell when you read it, but especially with the glazing of Rome, but you know, the advancement and I guess the, you know, the flourishing of culture such as literature, knowledge, arts, whatnot, is something that I do notice that a lot of really successful kingdoms and empires cultivate. And you can definitely see Khosrau definitely, obviously it's not just enough to be economically well, not enough to just be militarily well, but also we need a strong culture. We need, you know, like with the Zoroastrianism thing, like the restoration of that, like, you know, like there's just so much going on there, and it is really great to see. And he's definitely I keep saying this, but he's covering all the aspects that need to be covered for a very successful empire, and he's doing it like wonderfully and just effective. Like that's really the word I would use to describe him: efficient and very effective. And yeah, just very, very great ruler.
Manage an army in battle formation. Backgammon, on the other hand, quickly acquired new Iranian rules that reflected the random nature of fate in the Zoroastrian belief system. Together, these games taught important lessons about how to control what you can and accept what you can't. And it was through Iran and Khosrau's ever-active trading network with Rome that chess and backgammon traveled to the West and became the games we know today. All of these changes...
Yeah, I'm more of a checkers guy. People scoff at that, like, oh, checkers, that's a more simple game? True champions play chess. Because I've, you know, I know a lot of chess players in my life. And, you know, when I say I prefer checkers, I think checkers is more fun and easier to follow. People kind of scoff at me. They're like, ugh, he's not as cultured as the rest of us. No offense. It's just those are the chess players I've come across. Again, I like checkers more. I have more fun with checkers, personally. But, yeah, that's really cool to learn about that. So I at least know who to blame now for all those, you know, chess elitists that I come across. So thanks, Khosrau. I instantly hate you now. I'm back on Rome's side. No, I'm joking. I was never on Sasanian's side or anyone's side, but I do really like Khosrau personally. And yeah, you know. Sorry, let's get back to the video.
And reforms were the product of a lifetime for Khosrau, but he laid the foundation for them in the very first years of his reign. It was the perfect time. The Hephthalites were busy fending off Turks in the north, the Arabs had allied with Iran and created a buffer zone to the south, and the Romans, under Justinian, had signed a treaty known as the Eternal Peace. With so few enemies to threaten him, Khosrau seized the opportunity and proved himself worthy of the name Anushirawan, which Iranians still know him by today. But the peace which allowed Khosrau to launch his empire of reforms would soon come to an end.
Wait a minute, you mean to tell me that the Eternal Peace wasn't eternal? Oh man, that's such a funny name.
Beleaguered Ostrogoth messengers stumbled into Iran across a Roman border opened by the Treaty of Eternal Peace. They raced along the roads that Khosrau had recently rebuilt to beg for an audience with the Shah. And when the veils lifted to reveal Khosrau on his throne, the messengers spoke. Justinian has sent all of his armies to attack us in the west. Please, help us.
Cool, so we're gonna see more about the rivalry with Rome next video. I'll see you guys tomorrow when we cover that.